from Fox Business, Tyson Foods to hire 52,000 migrants after massive layoffs in Iowa.
Tyson laying off 1,200 workers after closing its pork factory in Perry, Iowa, only later to announce 52,000 jobs for migrants.
The company's excuse, migrants are getting the jobs that Americans don't want.
Wait, so maybe they'll tell us here, but there's absolutely no way they can just start hiring illegals. And what are they going to start paying them on? Fake social security numbers, fake bank accounts, paying them under the table? They've got to be talking about actual real life legal immigrants that have probably been in America for a long, I would assume, but maybe not. Who knows?
A human resources executive for the company telling Bloomberg the migrants have been, quote, very loyal. They've been uprooted, and what they want is stability. What they want is a sense of belonging.
Let's bring in Fox.
Yeah, so the migrants... Now, okay, I guess we're going to find out whether they're talking about legal or illegal, but he's telling you right there, in the case, if, and we'll find out, but if this is about illegal immigrants, then they're literally telling you right there, we have created this dependent underclass, and they're going to work for cheaper than Americans.
Fox and Friends Weekend co-host Pete Hegseth. Pete, good to see you.
Yes.
But again, lower wages, taking American jobs. This was the reason why Democrats were opposed to illegal immigration 10, 15, 25 years ago. But here it plays out. This costs Americans a livelihood.
That's true. It was also the reason why the Chamber of Commerce crowd of the Republican Party was so resistant to Donald Trump back in 2015, 2016, dependent on importing cheap labor. He said, we're going to build that wall. We're going to stop this. I'm going to put Americans first.
So now he's talking about build the wall, and hopefully they'll get to this. But they have to differentiate, right? When you're talking about hiring 52,000 people, there's, I mean, I don't know how it works, but it doesn't seem possible to hire, I mean, there's millions of illegals at this point, but it just doesn't seem possible to hire 52,000 and pay them all straight cash or give them like, I guess New York is giving them prepaid debit cards. So anything is possible.
Wages will rise as a result. And now you've got an inversion of that with the Democrat Party saying, come on in. And then we've heard glimpses of it, right? When Nancy Pelosi said, who else is going to pick our crops, right? I mean, that.
Yeah, and we, of course, remember when Kelly Osbourne said something very similar.
And if you kick every Latino out of this country, then who is going to be cleaning your toilet, Donald Trump?
Oh, that's no.
In the sense that,
no.
You know what I mean? Like when I'm saying
there's
that.
There's more.
That's their mindset. And the businesses are happy to do it when there's no e-verifier, there's no consequences. And so cheaper labor for this business to produce a product. And it's not an easy job. You know, people that do those jobs, they're dirty, they're tough, but Americans should have the first shot, and they should have a good shot.
And I believe, I don't want to drag them because I don't know if it was Tyson or another meatpacking plant, but in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, they had some sort of deal with African nations where a bunch of legal, whatever backdoor deal was happening, legal migrants that barely spoke English from African countries all over the continent were going to Sioux Falls, South Dakota and working at the meatpacking plant. And I was working in real estate at the time, but I would notice that 95% of them all had January 1st birthdays with different years, because wherever it is they came from, they didn't have a system in place to even, document when they were born. And that was way back in late 2020, early 2021, well before the influx of purely illegals, right? And the company I was working for they were slumlords, but different story. Right? I mean, just they were renting to legal migrants at astronomical rates for Sioux Falls, South Dakota, because they knew those people had nowhere else to go. So either way, no matter how you split it, those people are going to be taken advantage of. And that might be the nice way to look at it, because in my experience, they're just mean, rude, nasty, entitled people that are throwing out the Uncrustables and fighting with police officers and dragging women across the pavement. I don't, let me calm down.
Good wage.
And it's so dismissive. The language that they use, that Americans don't want these jobs.
Yeah, it's very dismissive on the part of Tyson, but that same level of entitlement is what the migrants have. And hopefully we'll get here. We're just getting started. This is about 8 minutes long. We're only a minute and 30 in, but hopefully, I mean, this is Fox Business, right? So maybe they will make it clear that this company is actually hired. And I'm not saying it makes it good, maybe a little bit better in the grand scheme, but they have to have hired legal migrants, who showed up prior to 2021. I hope.
Really?
Americans had these jobs,
right?
And they lost them.
Correct.
Exactly.
And if you thought about paying, if Americans are doing the jobs, they're going to raise the wages for the jobs too. That's all good for everybody.
Yeah.
Shifting gears now to this, the Biden administration is sending an additional $25 million to Haiti as 80% of Port-au-Prince is now under control of violent criminal gangs. And now the White House is actively discussing using the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay to process migrants if Haitian refugees flee to the U.S. en masse.
Yeah, so they've been talking about this using Gitmo to process Haitian migrants, but obviously the word process shouldn't even be mentioned, right? Like when you say process, you mean you're going to take them in and give them a bus ticket to New York City or Chicago? What do you mean process?
Pete, what do you make of this? Because again, you could just pick apart the refugee part of how many more many more people are we going to?
Correct. I mean, I served there. If we want to use it for that, we can. There's plenty of space. They've done it in the past. Yes, Gitmo is known in the popular conscience for the detention center after 9/11, but it's long been a place where they've held folks that are fleeing via sea. That was me as a young platoon leader in 2004 at Guantanamo Bay for a year. Ultimately, you know what they did with people that landed ashore or we interdicted with naval ships? They were repatriated. You know what repatriation means? Sent back to your country. That's the difference here. Do you think the Biden administration is going to repatriate, or does Gitmo become a giant processing center by which they easily then transport them to the United States? So Gitmo would work great. Depends on how they plan to use it.
So at this point, I think word is out. Everybody knows, as hard as they might try to turn these people into voters, which they might be able to do eventually, but I think we all know Elon Musk famously pointed it out that the census, that these people are for census purposes. So the establishment left gets more congressional seats or whatever because they have more people in their district. But for right now, they're complaining that there are too many people, too many illegals in blue places. Obviously, Brandon Johnson in Chicago and Eric Adams in New York. So you want that later down the road so you can, grab more power. But right now, it's just a little bit too much for you to deal with. You have to cut a deal with a completely communist legal aid foundation to give migrants more shelter forever as long as they want. And then he goes out there. I'm getting off track here, but Eric Adams, we made a deal and it's not going to be the same. It's like, it never should have got this far. Different story.
Processes in air quotes because they don't really vet these people very well at all.
So
when I read this next story, I immediately thought of you. Rachel and I were going to do this on a podcast. I'm like, no, we shouldn't do it unless we have someone like Pete to talk about it. So the words duty, honor, country have long inspired West Point cadets, instilling deep sentiments of service and patriotism. But the military academy has decided to drop the motto from their mission statement, instead replacing it with the words Army values.
Very interesting. So it looks like they're moving on to another story, but we genuinely don't know, and the media has been working hard on this, to conflate legal and illegal immigration. And I just don't know how in the world a major corporation, a major meatpacking company like Tyson could hire 52,000 illegals. Clearly there's something I don't know.
What the hell does Army values mean, Pete?
Well, there are 7 Army values, which we learn in the Army.
Can they change over time, though?
Loyalty, duty, respect, self-service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Can they change? Sure. Are they more nebulous when you put it in there as Army values? What could the Army's values be 10 years from now? They could be different than today. No doubt. I've talked to a lot of West Pointers about this. So West Point's saying, we didn't change the motto. So it's still duty, honor, country in the motto. We just took duty, honor, country out of our mission statement and said we're going to turn it into the Army value. You see, West Point was supposed to have the highest standards. So what higher can you get than duty, honor, country? I mean, you throw God
It's
in
actually,
there, but
so, hold on, pause. This actually makes perfect sense, right? It's part of the controlled chaos, the controlled demise. They're doing a very similar thing with the police officers, right? And any sort of self-defense, right? We know about Daniel Penny and the BLM protesters that are getting paid out, and the cops that were being hunted down, but maybe they weren't being hunted down for booing Letitia James, the federal monitors in California that are saying, "Oh, well, yeah, crime is through the roof," but it's obviously the police, the fault of the police. It just never ends, and this is another angle of attack to destroy any level of, I guess, masculinity. I don't know, any level of authority, right? To just right. I mean, they're now trotting out a man in a woman's army suit to tell you the air is racist. Like this is real CW2 stuff for sure.
duty, honor, country is the motto, and it's all the progressive stuff that's made its way into the curriculum there at West Point. And they've used West Point because that's where you craft the officers that craft the policy of the future. And so DEI is
Crazy. So that's like the end of the line, right? So they're going to start at kindergarten with gay BCs and anti-racist baby in every step of the way. And I mentioned this on Instagram a couple years ago in a reel that went, fairly viral, but they start you off in kindergarten with gay BCs and anti-racist baby. Then you get to middle school and you got some weirdo teachers that are going to try to convince you that you're the opposite gender. Then you get to high school and they're going to lob on the crazy TikTok propaganda. Then you get to college and they're going to indoctrinate even further now that you're not at home and convince you to scream at anybody that makes a different lunch order than you. You get past that. Maybe you're still not buying it and you go into the armed forces and they're going to lob on even more crazy propaganda. And this has to be from an outside force because, right? So the outside force wants America to destroy itself from within.
deep inside the curriculum there at the civilian professors are just like civilian professors at other universities. West Point's got a lot of problems, and every once in a while we get a moment like this where they do something so egregious like removing duty honor country. You go, what else is happening under the tent there? And there's a lot, and it's bad.
I wanted to make sure I got this right. Remember when Army General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said, "I want to understand white rage."
And yes, I certainly do remember that. And now, fast forward a year or two, and they're literally writing books because they've pinpointed who they're going to blame for the demise of the weirdo establishment authoritarian left-wing party.
It goes back to what you're talking about. And he had to back away from that comment.
Milley's been a sham for a long time. He's now been replaced by CQ Brown. But he was yelling about, we need to rename the bases. Hey, Mark Milley, were they racist when you were the commander at that base? Because you were there for decades ago and it wasn't a problem. So they were kowtowing to politicians for a long time.
And that's what makes it all even worse, even more sinister, even more weird. We can look at all the clips of big-name Democrats who were talking about border security, right, and all of their policies on marriage, all of this stuff. And somewhere along the lines, likely around 2008 to 2011, 2012, the advent of Twitter and Barry O, it all just completely did a 180 and then went through the roof with the derangement, come the arrival of Donald Trump, who naturally, as we all know, people loved for 15 seasons on The Apprentice. But nope, not anymore. I mean, they can't pump the brakes now, but at that point in time, they pumped the brakes and did a hard 180.
Long time.
Do you want to do that?
Go ahead.
Let them eat snake. The left's anti-meat agenda slithering out of control. A new study suggesting turning to Burmese pythons as an alternative, sustainable source of meat.
I saw this headline. I didn't read it, but maybe they're going to talk about it a little bit.
How does this sound to Pete? We know you love some snakes. Watch.
Pete's really afraid of snakes.
I don't like
Tell us about these snakes.
Whoa.
Hey, Pete, you should watch what's fun.
All these things are visiting from my...
Words are
Of course, how eating snakes could help fight climate change, which I guess is a step up from the bugs.
We just doing this story because we wanted to play that video of
Thank you, guys.
you.
The least masculine moment I've had. Yeah, I don't like snakes, but I'll tell
we
you
saw
this.
that.
But I tell you, if they taste good, I'm in. I don't want them all up in my face, and I don't know how to. I didn't grow up dealing with them. You've said you're more comfortable with them catching them. I'd like to teach my boys to be able to catch snakes, but I don't think that means they're going to be a snake farmer. Can you imagine being a snake farmer?
No.
How many do you have? Where do you hold them? What if one gets loose? It's not like the cow that was up our driveway 2 weeks ago that the neighbor said, "Where's my cow?" They came and got him. Burmese python gets loose. What do you do?
This is garbage. This study was garbage.
I'm sure it is.
I read it. People eat rattlesnake, fried rattlesnake. You can go anywhere in the
As a
Southwest.
novelty, they don't use it as a staple.
No, it's not a staple. But again, these climate nuts are going to turn to Asia for sustainable meat sources. They eat dogs. People farm dogs for meat. They just banned dog farming in South Korea. Oh, and that doesn't go into effect till 3 years from now.
Listen, but snake might taste good.
Yeah.
All right, pretty classic Fox News stuff. Oh, they banned dog. All right, fair enough. And I'm a little bitter because the headline is they hired 52,000 migrants. And unfortunately, we never learned if those were legal or illegal. But I guess it doesn't matter at this point because the media has made it crystal clear that it's exactly the same.